New Hampshire Senator Jean Shaheen has been fighting to get the victims medical assistance and answers about who did this.
If we don't hold those responsible accountable, then we can be sure it's going to continue to happen. And that's a national security risk to the United States and to our personnel.
Also leading a bipartisan effort to support government workers who have experienced brain injuries. These are CIA, State Department officers in general. From reported directed energy attacks, does the government have to do a better job of taking care of their own?
Absolutely. And Senator Collins and I have just reintroduced legislation to provide more comprehensive care and benefits for those people who are attacked. Sadly, this will be the third bill that I have helped to introduce to address that problem, and we still see a lack of coordination for all of those people who have been attacked. And we see too much information that's not being shared either with Congress or with the public, and I think that's problematic. That information has been classified. Again, why I think we need more information available to Congress and the public.
The reason why they were removed is we couldn't tell them how to protect themselves. You can't send people to serve overseas and tell them, by the way, the people that were there before you came back with these very serious injuries, and we don't know how you can protect yourself. So I think my problem is not about punishing Cuban regime or punishing Cubans. This is about how do we send Americans someplace when we can't even tell them how to protect themselves against what happened to the people that were there right before them. That's always been the challenge, and that remains the challenge. Some of which can be discussed publicly, some of which will have to wait. Number one is that the technology that can make something like this possible isn't all that exotic or even all that novel inside the United States. There's been reports in Europe and in other places. And I think the more we look, the more we start to find other instances of it. A definitive answer here, but what there should be no doubt of is that American personnel serving abroad and those of other countries have been injured using something that you don't normally see.
Around the world, American personnel are being attacked in their homes, in hotels, and even on public streets. For most, it starts with what seems like a loud noise that's followed by pain or a sense of pressure in the head. Many are left with chronic damage, including hearing loss, vertigo, cognitive and motor impairment, severe headaches, and inability to sleep. In the words of a recent press report, our diplomats are suffering a, quote, concussion without a concussion. The Senate-passed bill before us today provides important authority to assist these brain injury victims, and it deserves our unanimous support. But we all must do more. Unfortunately, these attacks have continued and spread. First, it started in Havana in late 2016 and spread to China in 2017. 2 months ago, press reports described more than 130 possible cases all over the world, including right here in Washington, D.C. And just last week, 24 new cases among U.S. personnel in Vienna were revealed. Simply put, this is kind of scary stuff. The people who serve our nation overseas are generally worried for themselves and their families, and they need to know that we have their backs. When the prior administration pulled our personnel out of Havana 4 years ago, they said, quote, numerous Embassy Havana employees have been targeted in specific attacks. These employees have suffered significant injuries as a consequence of these attacks. In contrast, President Biden has refused to call these what they are, attacks on U.S. personnel. And Secretary of State Tony Blinken publicly said perhaps no one is responsible for causing these injuries. I will tell you from my briefings and briefings in another annex, that is absolutely incorrect. We may not be able to fill in all the blanks yet, but we know too much to dismiss these attacks as unexplained health incidents. 4 years ago, medical experts convened by the State Department agreed victims were likely dealing with brain trauma from a non-natural source, and the evidence has only grown more conclusive since then. Last year, the National Academy of Sciences said that directed pulsed radio frequency energy is most likely the cause. According to the NAS, the situation raises grave concerns about bad actors who may have weapons. So while we must assist victims with today's bill, we must do more. We must call these heinous attacks what they are, and they are attacks. And the people attacking us need to know the consequences will be severe when we find out who they are, when we get the attribution. Otherwise, we aren't doing what we can do to deter future attacks. The men and women who serve our nation overseas deserve no less. I have prepared a bill to do just that, which I will be introducing this week. And I want to thank Chairman Meeks and our Intelligence Committee colleagues for their bipartisan work on the Havana Act, which I strongly support, and with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
I rise in strong support of this legislation. When intelligence community officers risk their health and safety in service of their country, they need to know they'll receive the full support of the United States government if they're injured. That assurance is crucial for the officers' ability to carry out their missions. As the public now knows, our officers have been the victims of targeted attacks around the globe. I want to say up front that these incidents are real and the officers' accounts are credible. Victims have described the sudden onset of symptoms such as intense head pressure, dizziness, vertigo, and cognitive difficulties. Some incidents have resulted in traumatic brain injuries, debilitating pain, and other serious health issues. Many victims continue to experience chronic health problems and require sustained treatment. Over the past several months, we have been looking into these incidents. In my view, there are 3 objectives. The first is to determine the best way to help these officers and their families. The second is to find out who is perpetrating these attacks. And third, to conduct strong oversight of our agencies and make the necessary changes to achieve the first 2 objectives. That will require vigorous effort, but I am committed to uncovering the truth. The bill we are considering today takes important steps to assist the victims of these attacks and to ensure that our people will be compensated for their brain injuries. It builds on legislation we passed last Congress to improve workers' compensation for certain personnel and their dependents. Some have called the legislation technical, which it is, but it is nevertheless vital. Patriotic Americans serving to promote and protect our freedoms deserve our gratitude and full support. The Senate has already passed this bill by unanimous consent. I fully support it and urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to do the same.
It's imperative that we, as the elected representatives of the American people, working with the executive branch, get to the bottom of exactly who is behind these events, why they're occurring, and how to stop them. But we must also make sure to do our part and take care of the public servants who put themselves on the line every day for our own interests. I want to say thank you to the President, to the Secretary of State, the State Department, for taking these cases seriously, for listening to the families and all of the trauma that they've gone through and showing them nothing but the utmost respect. This bill is an excellent contribution to this effort, and I look forward to working on a bipartisan basis on this critical issue going forward. I thank Chairman Schiff for his hard work, and I ask all of my colleagues to support this bill. With that, I yield the balance of my time.
I stand in support of my amendment demanding action in response to the Havana syndrome incidents affecting Americans around the world. The recent string of mysterious attacks on U.S. diplomats and personnel, often called Havana syndrome, is a serious threat to our national security. Having spoken directly with individuals impacted, I know these attacks are having lasting and detrimental impacts on the health of our nation's public servants. I stand here today to call for a robust interagency response, one that reflects the severity and urgency of the situation. The State Department must play an active role in this response, share relevant information with Congress, particularly the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and make sure all affected personnel receive prompt and appropriate care. It is our duty to ensure our public servants get the care and answers they deserve. As a former federal employee, I intend to keep pressing the administration to better protect our diplomats and federal employees serving at home and abroad. I know firsthand their commitment to their missions, their devotion to our country, and the promises we have made to them. I urge my colleagues to join me in this cause. Thank you, and I yield back.